Hey everyone, welcome to the stream. It is time for another recording of my weekly show, The Break. And this week I have a ton of, I think, very cool topics that I would like to share with you. We're going to talk about Star Trek and the Apple Vision Pro. This is like fiction and reality, future and past coming together. The Apple Vision Pro is one of the VR headsets. I think that was originally inspired by what we saw in Star Trek: The Next Generation with the holodeck, and kind of that, wish fulfillment that maybe one day in the future we will be able to walk around in entirely computer-generated worlds that are undistinguishable from reality. Well, we're getting there. We're in the process of getting there, but there is a link between these two that I want to discuss later on in the show. We're going to talk about Star Wars and Star Wars news. We're going to talk about fantasy. I've got an announcement, or a pre-announcement, I should say, of a webinar that you may be interested in if you want to engage in the time of Lent, so our journey towards Easter, and if you are a Tolkien fan. Well, I'm going to bring these two together, so stay tuned for news about that. I'll talk a bit more about reading comics on a phone, and I will also talk a little bit more about, Pluto. Pluto, which is a new anime series on Netflix, which I've discovered thanks to my TikTok audience, and I'm very excited about it, so I'd like to introduce you to that one as well. And I have an iOS app called Feed with 4 E's that I tried out, and it's pretty cool. It's a very, very unique app, and maybe useful to you too if you have access to the iOS infrastructure, and maybe it will come to Android as well. So all that and more for this week's episode of The Break. If you are new to this stream, if you are new to my live streams, I'm Father Roderick. I'm a priest and I'm a geek, and I have been doing this show in one form or another, sometimes with a different name, since 2005. So this is one of the longest running Catholic podcasts in the world, if not the longest. And it's a mix of all sorts of topics that I like to share with my audience, some of who have been with me from the very first days of podcasting. So you can follow me on social media. If you look for Father Roderick, almost on any platform, I use the same handle. And soon you will be able to also join my, the list of readers that have access to my diary. So I'm creating diary entries. I'm currently secretly writing, so I'm training myself to write a short story every day. These are events that I witness in my life, journeys that I'm on, memories sometimes, lessons learned, all that. And soon I'm in the process of setting up a new website where you will be able to sign up for that particular, for the access to that diary. And then a couple of times a week, I will send you one of those stories. It's a lot of fun to write. I really enjoy writing. I'm currently writing in Dutch. And then what I'm going to do is to use ChatGPT technology to translate that into English. That's, of course, a huge time saver. The only thing is, of course, I need to figure out how to do that in a way that still sounds like me. I don't want my stuff to be rewritten in English in a style that doesn't fit me. But I'm sure that there are ways to train the technology to do that. And I noticed that I write differently in Dutch compared to English. I can tell that Dutch is still a language, since it's my native language. I'm even more creative in Dutch. It's easier to formulate things. I'm less focused on how I say what I want to say and more on what I want to share. And hopefully I'll be able to send out those diary entries both in English and in Dutch to the various people that I reach. Hey, Michiel, good to see you. Hey, Margot, hope you're doing well. And Lauren is there too. I am not live streaming my masses anymore. We put that on hiatus because there was almost no attendance since a lot of people went back to their own community. So it was a lot of effort to organize those online masses, and I had to do it all by myself. So at one point we decided to no longer do that. I still miss it from time to time because it was fun. It was very different from the masses, of course, that I celebrate here in the Netherlands. But it was just balancing the investment of time and energy that it took, and then the return on investment, which became smaller and smaller. And that, in a sense, was a good thing. I really was happy that people were going back to their own offline, real-life communities. There's always so much extra value in being in mass for real. So what I'm going to do now, so it's 6 minutes past 6. We're going to first record the show. The show has 2 parts. It's the show, the public part that goes out to everyone who is subscribed to my public podcasting feed, and then I record a second part for my patrons. But if you happen to catch me live here on Monday at 6 Central European Time, noon Eastern, and 9 o'clock a.m. Pacific Time, then you're lucky because you get access to the full show, even if you're not a paying Patreon community member. Of course, I would still invite you to go over to my Patreon page over at patreon.com/FatherRoderick and join the Patreon community, because then you'll also able to download the audio version of the full show and listen to it every week. So we're first going to record the show, then I'll get back to the questions. And if you are joining me during the show, or even if you're watching this later on after I went live, because this stays up on Facebook and on Twitch, and also on YouTube, actually, then also feel free to leave me any comments or questions or topics you'd like me to address in the next show. I always read every comment, and if possible, I will also give it, post a reaction to your comments. Hey, Jason, good to see you. English is very hard to master. It's easy to pick up. It's very hard to master. And I'm so much more at ease in English than I've ever been. But it's when expressing myself, I make choices. So when I feel like I can say almost everything in English. Writing is different. Writing is harder because you're more focused. It's when I'm writing, I tend to overthink when I'm writing in English, and I don't have that barrier when I'm writing in Dutch. Although sometimes I do write all the scripts for my videos straight into English, because I know the end result is going to be in English. So it would be like an extra step, because these diary entries are going to go out to both a Dutch and an English audience. It makes more sense to do it in Dutch, but maybe I'll switch over time. I don't know. Depends. All right, so let's go.
Do you need a break?
You read my mind.
Come with me.
Who doesn't need a break from time to time? I'm Father Roderick. I'm a priest and I'm a geek, and I'm here to serve you during your break, whether you're listening to this in the car, on your way to work, or on the way back, or you're just doing laundry, or you just have time to waste. I hope you feel super welcome and that you enjoy everything I'm going to share with you. So sit back, relax, and I hope you have fun. The show, as is all my work, is brought to you thanks to my Patreon community. So if you want to support my mission to reach out way beyond the boundaries of my parish church, and to reach people on everywhere on the planet, and maybe in outer space, who knows where these podcasts will end up, then I could really use your support. So go over to patreon.com/FatherRoderick, and that's where you will find all the information you need on how to support me.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
there was some sad news in the Star Wars community this past week. We heard about the unexpected death of a very well-known Star Wars actor who was not only applauded for his work in Star Wars, but many of the older people like me knew him from a totally different franchise, which had nothing to do with spaceships or laser swords, and that was Rocky. I'm talking about Carl Weathers. Carl Weathers died in his sleep at the age of 76 years, and many of us first gotten to know him because he was the opponent of Rocky Balboa in Sylvester Stallone's Rocky saga. He first appeared in the original Rocky movie, and then his character became a recurring character, which is, I think, the only one who showed up in the first 4 Rocky movies. He played the character of Apollo Creed, and at first he is the nemesis of the story. He is the one who fights Rocky in the arena, and then, of course, over time, because they keep butting heads, literally, he ultimately develops a friendship with Rocky Balboa and becomes a partner, so to say. And ultimately, his character dies in the 4th Rocky movie because of a fight with one of Rocky's enemies. I think it's the Russian guy who ultimately ends up killing Apollo Creed. Now, Carl Weathers has done a lot of work as an actor. In fact, he was already an accomplished actor way before Sylvester Stallone was an actor. When he did his audition for the first Rocky movie, he was playing opposite of Sylvester Stallone, and he thought, Carl thought that Sylvester Stallone was only the writer. He was the writer of the script, but he didn't know that Sylvester Stallone had negotiated that he would also play the main character, that he would be Rocky. And so when he was auditioning with Sylvester Stallone, he complained, like, you know what, this would be so much easier if I had a real actor to play with here in this audition, not realizing that, in fact, Sylvester Stallone was the actor. But Stallone at the time had no experience whatsoever. And so I think that's a very funny anecdote to see how much Carl Weathers was ahead of Sylvester Stallone in terms of experience. Now, of course, that first Rocky movie was amazing. I still watch it from time to time. It's such a fantastic accomplishment, especially if you consider how small the production was. It was filmed on a shoestring budget. Sylvester Stallone had gone to so many different production companies. Nobody believed in this idea, and especially nobody wanted him. He's this kind of small, diminutive guy. Nobody believed that he could pull off playing the main character of that movie. They were looking for, big, very sturdy guys to take on the role of Rocky. But thankfully for Sylvester Stallone's career, he held on to his conviction that he was the one who should portray Rocky. And it's not just about the fighting. If you've never seen the movie, what I think makes Rocky so incredibly compelling as an experience is it's not about the boxing. It's about this, relatively simple, poor guy who has a dream and who ultimately ends up in this arena. But it's a story of his life. It's the story of how he treats the people around him. And there's something extremely heartwarming about that story. And so in the first movie, Carl Weathers plays really like the opposite. When Sylvester Stallone's Rocky is kind of disarming to a certain extent. You really feel for him. You have empathy. Whereas Carl Weathers' character is very, distant. He's this famous boxer and, you know, looks down on everyone, as a very unsympathetic character, which couldn't be more different from the person, from the character, from Carl Weathers in real life, who's a very kind, charming guy. I saw him, I think, twice actually during the Star Wars convention or celebration in Anaheim, and then just last year. In spring last year, he was on stage several times at the London Star Wars celebration, where he spoke with the interviewers in front of this huge crowd, of which I was, you know, one of the many fans there, about his experiences, not just in playing the character of Greef Karga in The Mandalorian, but also about his experience in directing a number of these episodes in the Mandalorian series. And I had already seen a number of interviews with him on the Star Wars website. There are some extras that they posted, the making of The Mandalorian. I think there are a few documentaries that you can find on Disney Plus where he's part of a roundtable talk about how The Mandalorian came about. And he always struck me as a guy who has so much more experience than it seems. At first, when he was sitting there at the table, I was like, oh, he's just one of the actors. But in fact, he was sitting next to all these other famous Star Wars producers and directors, because he was first and foremost the director of these Star Wars episodes. And when he started to talk about the way he envisioned his episodes, I was like, wow, I had no idea that the guy who played Apollo Creed had so much insight in how to tell a compelling Star Wars story. His role as Greef Karga was, for me, maybe the least interesting part of what he did for Star Wars. I think he was much more of a director than an actor. I always felt that the character that he played was maybe too close to the real actor. It just didn't feel very Star Wars to me. Maybe it's also because I've seen these Rocky movies so often, and so it's hard to kind of put the actor in a totally different universe. It was a bit of a disconnect. He's too well known, and I also felt that the character itself of Greef Karga was not that interesting. It was a little bit of a character you only see on the fringes of the story. It doesn't, well, of course he is in a couple of action scenes, but all in all, he's a bureaucrat. He's just someone who is, directing other people, but he's not that important to the story. At least that's how it came across to me. But a very likable man, and so shocking in a sense that all of a sudden he's no longer there. It's just so hard to imagine. I was standing there in the big in this big hall where they had all the public interviews. So for a lot of the sessions, you needed to have a ticket, and I didn't get any of the tickets. It was a lottery, and I wasn't lucky last year. So I was super glad that all these actors also showed up on the main stage where everybody could be there. And I remember standing very close to the stage when he was interviewed together with a few other actors from The Mandalorian. And that just feels like yesterday. And it's so weird that someone who is so well known and so beloved for what he did in the entertainment business all of a sudden just dies in his sleep. I know, 76 years old. You say that's a respectable age, but still, it's pretty young, and it's just not someone. He hasn't been sick, as far as I know. It's all of a sudden, just someone flips the switch and he's no longer there. It reminds us that no matter the star status of someone, we're all ultimately just human beings, and our life on Earth is limited. And it's always, the older you get, the more you appreciate the life that's been given to you. When you're young, when I was 18 years old, I never thought about the finality of our life here on Earth. And the more I get older myself, the more I realize, I can do stuff now, but 10 years from now, I won't be able to do what I can do now. So you start to value more and more every day that you've been granted. And as Tolkien puts it so well, what matters is how do you use the time that has been given to you. The duration, that's a very relative thing. You know, you can have a very full, accomplished life that is only, 36, 37 years old. Think of the life of Jesus. Jesus never reached the age of 40, which is kind of so insane if you think about it, at least his earthly life. And but you can reach 100 years and still feel that your life has not been very useful, or I don't know. It all depends. It's not about the duration. Time in itself is a very relative concept. Our experience of time is so different at various moments in our lives. I think what matters ultimately is what do you do with your life, and how can you do what brings you joy, what brings the world joy. And, you know, being a performer, being an actor or a director, I think is a wonderful way to give some of your talents to in this case, a global audience. And his legacy will live on for decades. Once you're in Star Wars, you're part of a narrative tapestry that I think will still be here a century from now. These are such epic stories. It's like Tolkien's stuff that just never goes away. It's just classic and timeless to a certain extent. When you look back at the Rocky movies, they are much more dated, I think, than Star Wars, because it's a different type of story. It's a story that takes place in the real world, and it's situated. It's dated because and the story needs to be dated, but it's harder, especially these later Rocky movies. They're very cringy now. You can't. I can't watch 3 and 4. It's just so bad, and so outdated. But the first one, to a certain extent, is much more timeless because it tells a timeless story of a poor guy who has a dream and works really hard to get there. That is a story that works in every age and in every time. And I think for Star Wars, a lot of these stories are also very timeless. So it's a gift to know, to have these stories and to have these actors and storytellers that bring us these stories that will last so long in our mind, in our culture, and go even beyond what one single person can do in his or her life. This is also why writing is such a gift to the world. When you write, you leave a legacy that can survive you for decades, and many people can discover what you write, even if you have already passed on. There's something wonderful about storytelling. This podcast will be long forgotten, even a week from now. It will have disappeared. But there are certain things that will last longer. Anyway, before I start like a very philosophical, theological reflection that won't end anymore, let's move on to our next segment. But keep Carl Weathers and his family in your prayers.
The most beloved fantasy story of all time. It is the tale of a small hobbit and the great wizard who appeared to him one day.
All right, dude, check it out. Go like that way, and then up this one mountain, and then kill all the hippies you come across.
No, I'm searching for a dragon's treasure.
I'm the wizard, you're the dwarf, and you will respect my authority.
I am no dwarf.
My running trainer, or one of the trainers that I train with for my running, is currently in New Zealand, and he is doing a tour with his wife on the southern island, and every day he posts an update. And because he is traveling while we are still asleep, every morning I'm looking forward to seeing the photos. And some of these places I've been, some I would like to go one day. But every time I see these photos and I read these stories about New Zealand, I'm actually feeling like I'm reconnecting with Middle Earth. And having been in the places where these movies were filmed, that's just one of those unforgettable memories that lasts a lifetime. I'll always cherish these visits to Middle Earth, aka New Zealand. It's a bit like the first time I was in Philadelphia and I was running up those stairs to stand there where, you know, Rocky in the first movie is dancing around. It just makes it like all of a sudden the movie comes alive. There's a very special connection if you've been in these places and then afterwards you rewatch the movie and you're like, I was standing there. Anyway, speaking of the Lord of the Rings, I have some news or something that I would like to announce or pre-announce because it's still in the preparatory stage. But I'm currently working on a diary that I'm writing, not for myself, but I'm writing these stories on a daily basis to share them with you and to share them with my the people that follow me in the Netherlands, people that know me from TV, people that know me because of my work in the parishes. And I'm writing these stories about my trips, could be about Middle Earth, could be about all the stuff that I do. And what I hope to do with these diary entries is to kind of nurture the relationship with my followers. So if people only know me from my podcast or from TikTok or YouTube, if people are interested in the person behind those videos or podcasts, then I would like to offer them a little glimpse into my life. What does the life of a media priest look like? And so I just wrote a story. So none of that is live. Well, the Dutch sign-up page is already live, but I still have to work on the Kajabi page for the English sign-up page. But the idea is that if you're already subscribed to my newsletter, or you've done that in the past, then you will receive the access to these diary entries. But I guess probably 95% of the people that currently are watching my videos or listening to my podcast are not on that list. So I'm going to set that up soon. And then I'm going to send these stories that I'm currently writing. I'm going to deliver them to all these email addresses. And what I want is to make it really entertaining. I don't want to spam anyone. I don't believe anymore in the old-fashioned newsletters, some of which I receive myself, and I barely open them. It's like it's going to be this long list of links to, listen to this podcast, or please click on this article. And it's like, information overload. The few newsletters that I do read actually all have the same format, and it's a story. It's a column. It's a reflection, and that's the kind of email content that I think can still be of value, and people may be interested in that. So yesterday I wrote a story about my visit to the Tolkien exposition when I was in Rome, in the Museum of Contemporary and Modern Art. And I won't spoil what the story is about and what happens. It has a very controversial title, but you'll have to subscribe once the sign-up page is live to discover that for yourself. But what I do announce at the end of that article is that I'm going to do my first live webinar next week on Ash Wednesday. Ash Wednesday is the beginning of Lent, 40 days, a journey towards Easter. What I'm going to do is to do a live webinar that you can sign up for about Tolkien and what Tolkien can teach us about this journey towards Easter. What we're going to do is to follow the fellowship on their journey towards, ultimately the destruction of the ring. And I'm going to use that as a parallel journey to our own journey towards Easter. And there are a lot of spiritual lessons and life lessons that we can take from Tolkien's stories and the wisdom that he used in his stories, and then we can apply that to our own journey in faith, in life, on our way to Easter. It's kind of a modern way to start Lent. Of course, I encourage people to go to church as well and get and get signed with the ashes. But I think for a lot of people, you need more than just a ritual in church. Lent is not really part of our ambient culture anymore. So what I would like to try out is if I can be a guide at the start of this Lenten period and to use examples and stories that people are already familiar with to help them start this time of preparation of Lent in a way that appeals to them. So keep an eye on all my socials if you want to get the link to the webinar, to if you want to know how to sign up. It's an experiment. I've never done a webinar ever in my life. So even technically, I'm still figuring out how to make that happen. But I felt like I need to set myself a goal, because otherwise I'm just going to procrastinate. Oh, I want to do a webinar, but what am I going to do when I'll do it next week. And now I'm thinking, beginning of Lent, that's a great time to just start experimenting with this. And maybe it will all go wrong or not. Why should I catastrophize? Maybe it will just be fantastic. But what I hope is that it will also help me to get the hang of doing these webinars. And I would like to do these focused webinars, both on a spiritual level. So to do things almost like an online retreat, although it won't be a week in a monastery, but it could have the same function as why people go on a retreat. It's just to have a moment where you're thinking about stuff other than your daily life, and it helps you to think about what truly matters in your life. And I also want to do more educational webinars where it can be a way for me to reach out to people that may be interested in me coaching them, or being part of my mastermind group, where I'm going to help people that are like me, are working in the media or would like to work in the media, to up their skills and learn from this mastermind group and learn from my experience. But this is all still brand new. So in order to find these people that I want to help, I think these webinars can be a very kind of low threshold way to get the word out, and also to deliver true value, to help people right there and then in that webinar. And if people like my teaching style and think there is more where that came from, then of course it's much easier to get in touch with me and to get some coaching. Because I believe that ultimately that part of my ministry is very much built on relationships. It's just that this is one of the reasons that I always do my best to stream the recording sessions of this podcast that you're currently listening to stream those live. I can't really do that when I record The Walk, which is my other podcast, because I'm in the woods and internet reception over there is very spotty. So plus, it's kind of tricky to record both audio and video at the same time. But this show is very good for like a live taping, although why would I call it taping, because there's no tape involved, but you get the gist of what I want to say. But to just go live, and I know that this is not very interactive. It's just me talking, and the only difference if you're listening to this as an audio podcast is that you don't see me gesturing. I'm very Italian when I speak, so my hands are all over the place. But you can probably picture that, but there's not much else to see. It's just me in front of a camera with bookshelves in the background. So it's not the most exciting visual content, but what I like so much about it is not streaming the show as such, but it's the conversation around it. So while I'm talking to you, people are actually reacting to what I say, and they share their opinions or tips or sometimes reflections. And then when I'm done with the show, I go back to the chat room and we talk some more. And I really like that aspect. It's very small. I mean, there are just a handful of people watching it. But my hope is that if I keep doing this on Monday evening, the same time, same place, that over time this community can start to grow, because you get into the habits of people. So I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to do the webinars and what the frequency will be, but let's get this first Tolkien-inspired webinar off the ground first, and then we can always take it from there. So again, no link yet for you to click on to sign up, but in the days to come, you will get more information, especially, of course, if you're part of my Patreon community. You'll be the first to know, and you'll be the first to be able to sign up for that webinar. So yeah, I hope it's going to be awesome.
Japanimation. Cool.
It is time to talk about Japanese animation, and I would like to review the first episode of a new anime show on Netflix, and it's called Pluto. And here's the sound of the original Japanese trailer on Netflix, but I've only discovered it very recently thanks to my TikTok audience, and I was talking about Vinland Saga, and then someone said, "Have you seen this anime?" And it was some kind of an older anime, or Pluto, and could you review Pluto? And then I just asked my audience, so which one should I watch first? This older anime, I forgot what it was called, or Pluto. And then a lot of them said, "Oh no, do Pluto," because the advantage is it's only 8 episodes, which is extremely rare for anime. Usually they're like 24 episodes, like Vinland Saga. In fact, there are 48 that I still have to watch. But Pluto is just a few episodes, and it's also a finished story. It's based on a manga. And so this is one story featuring Astro Boy. I know nothing actually about the whole comic, and that's part of the appeal of the stuff that I do on TikTok. Most of my followers are very seasoned anime viewers and manga readers, so they know much more than I do. But for them, it's fun to see how someone who doesn't know the backstory of these anime, how I react to that, what I can guess about where the story is going. And so part of I think the reason that people like to see my reaction to these series is because they know more than I. So it gives them a certain, oh, I know, he doesn't know yet, but I know where this is going. And I can totally see the appeal of that. So for Pluto, I'm already intrigued after watching the first episode. These are long episodes. These are like almost an hour. But this story was so surprisingly deep. And it reminded me of the Isaac Asimov series. Not that I've read those, but I've heard about them. The robot laws and what robots can and can't do. And that discussion is part of this story as well. So what makes a human human? What should a robot do, and are there limitations? And are there consequences if robots actually disobey their programming? Can they actually do that? Is that part of their evolution, that they can also choose to become evil? Very interesting philosophical and moral issues. So, but it's also a very beautiful story. It does what a lot of these anime series do very well. It takes its time to tell a story. There's a lot of atmosphere. There's a lot of music in this first episode. So at one point, so you see this murder, but it's not just a detective story. Now, you are transported to Switzerland, where one of these former killer robots, there are like, I think 8 huge robots, and they have, I think, originally were designed to fight in wars, and then they basically became peaceful and started to serve humanity. And these robots are being killed all over the planet. One of these former battle robots is now serving as a butler to a very eccentric composer, an old blind man who lives alone in this massive house, and he plays the piano every day, and he's trying to translate his childhood memories when he still was able to see. He had a degenerative disease, and it was operated, and the operation saved his life but robbed him from his eyesight. But he's trying to evoke his childhood into music, but he gets stuck all the time. And the robot that serves him is intrigued by that. And then he hears that the man in his sleep is actually singing the rest of the melody that he can't put on paper. And so the robot starts to play that melody, and then the old guy is like, "Don't touch my piano, it's mine." And you start to realize that there is a massive trauma that took place somewhere. It's a hidden part of his story, his life story. And the robot, also having been traumatized to the extent that a robot can be traumatized by his war experiences, wants to help this old man to to discover more about what truly happened when he was a child. And I won't tell you how it ends, but it's got to do with music and the way the story and the music are intertwined. It's very meditative and so unlike Western storytelling. And I love that kind of poetic nature. And it's still about robots and there's still murders and explosions, but there's also this whole, I don't know, like the storytelling itself has so much more breathing room than we allow our stories in our Western media to have. This is also something that strikes me now that I'm rewatching Neon Genesis Evangelion, where I'm now watching the movie version that is based on the original TV series, and it's just so beautifully done. It's got these very quiet. This is a story about robots fighting robots, and yet there are these very deep, meditative moments where it's very psychological and moving also. This is a story that I'm now watching it for the third time and it still touches me. And I want to do more videos about it because I know that this also resonates with a lot of my followers on YouTube and TikTok. Because this is not just about robots. This is about human beings and about what moves us and what makes our life sometimes hard and difficult and sometimes gives us joy. And I love that dimension of anime. Anyway. So if you have access to Netflix, definitely check it out. It's called Pluto. What else can we do? Well, why not talk a little bit about other types of stories? The written type.
Why are you wearing glasses?
Reading.
Reading? Mm-hmm. I didn't know you could read.
Last week, I think I was complaining about that I had to change my reading plans because I discovered that I was unable to focus on these big stories like Red Rising. And last week, I actually had another problem that was preventing me from being able to focus. I thought it was just because these stories are so big and there's so many characters, but it turns out it was much simpler than that. I just had a chronic lack of sleep last week. Every night I only slept about 6 hours, some nights even 5. Don't ask why. It's probably also my own fault because I tend to procrastinate the moment of going to bed. But last Sunday I decided, you know what? This week I'm going to really hit the 7 or 8 hours per night. And so for 2 subsequent nights I slept 8 hours. And yesterday, I started reading the 4th Red Rising book again, and lo and behold, I could totally focus on the story. And it was a very good experience. And I was like, wow. So, you know what? To read well, I need to sleep well. That's a really good incentive for me to go to bed in time, because it kind of makes sense. When you're sleep deprived, your mind has trouble mustering the energy to focus. And this is not only just noticeable when I'm reading a book, but this is also true for the work that I do. The more sleep I've had, the easier it is to do my job. So, but last week when I wasn't able to focus on these long books, I picked up my phone before I went to bed. Maybe not the best idea to have like bright screens in your face right before you want to go to bed. But I was trying to change my mind. I always love to read a story or just so I can sleep. I can stop my churning brain that is always full of ideas. And when I'm stepping into a story, it helps me calm my mind. Maybe it's just me, but that's how it works. And so because I couldn't focus on a book, I was reading these Marvel stories, these Marvel comics. But I don't want to, lay in bed with a huge iPad. Normally, I love to read comics on my iPad because it's a big screen. I've got the 12.6-inch iPad, and it's a very relaxed way of reading. But it's a big device and it's heavy. So I was trying to read these comics on the phone, and that's hard because the the Marvel Comics app has an option to view the story. You're kind of guided over the pages, so it zooms in on certain panels and it zooms out. It's a wonderful thing. That alone makes, I think, the Marvel Ultimate app so valuable and so cool to use. But even on a big phone like the iPhone 15, it's still too small to read in a relaxed way. I constantly have to use my fingers to zoom in on the text, and it's just not a very good reading experience. And then I came across a very cool subset of comics on the Marvel Ultimate app, and that series is called Infinity Comics. And what they did is they took the original comic and reformatted it in a way that you can just scroll up. And I don't know exactly, it must have taken a long time to create those comics, because originally, of course, they weren't drawn as a long, like vertical, infinitely scrolling page, but they rearranged the elements, and they obviously have to leave out a lot of the text and a lot of the information. But what remains is this extremely relaxed way of reading a story. The only thing you need to do is use your thumb to scroll up. And these images are pretty big, the text is easy to read, and you still have the feeling that you're actually reading a comic. It's just it feels like almost as if the comic books and Mastodon or Axe or whatever, your newsfeed had a baby. Because it's the same idea of scrolling up, but at the same time, it's one continuous story. I really like them. And they have created these Infinity Comics about a whole slew of different comic book heroes. So you've got a few Spider-Man ones, you've got Vision, you've got Miss Marvel, Wolverine, X-Men, the Hulk. There's a bit of everything. And the only category that is lacking is Star Wars. I would love to see an Infinity comic series based on the comic books about Star Wars, because they have a pretty cool lineup of Star Wars stories. But in order to read them, I have to use my iPad. So anyway, so that's my experience with the Marvel Unlimited app, and it's I'm so glad that I have that opportunity to be able to read comic books whenever I am too tired to focus on a real book. And with that, it is time to wrap this show up. For my patrons, I will continue a little bit longer. Every week there is a premium version of the show that has some extra content. But if for whatever reason you are unable to join my Patreon supporters, I hope you enjoyed this particular episode. I try to keep them at about between 30 and 40 minutes, so you can have a sizable podcast experience. But if you want to listen for an hour or more, then you can always join the premium show via patreon.com/Father Roderick. So again, a reminder, very soon there will be more news about my first live Tolkien webinar. And we will accompany Frodo and Gimli and Legolas and Aragorn on their journey to Mount Doom, and which is also a spiritual journey that can reflect our own journey towards Easter. And then, of course, as soon as there's news about how you can sign up for my English diary entries, I will let you know as well. So follow me at Father Roderick on all social networks, except for X. I'm no longer there, but anywhere else, you can follow me there, Threads, or Mastodon or whatever. And we'll talk soon. Thanks for listening. I leave a small space so that later on in my editing program I can take this out and blend everything together. So I'm going to do one clap So it creates a peak in the waveform, makes it easier to cut out some of these parts. Hopefully that'll be enough. All right, let's move on with the premium part of the show.
Space. The final frontier.
Let's talk about Star Trek. And in fact, one of the promises of Star Trek came true with the advent of the Apple Vision Pro. I'm talking, of course, about the dream of the holodeck. This was one of the coolest aspects of living on the USS Enterprise, is to have access to this type of virtual room where once you step in, the computer will generate this 3D world around you that you can interact with. And it's not just you, but other people can join you in that experience. Well, we're not at that point yet, but it is coming closer with the advent of technology like the Apple Vision Pro, which of course in itself is not new technology. We've had these VR, AR glasses for many years now, but it looks to be one of the most advanced versions of that technology. And what it does is it can overlay computer-generated elements on top of the world as it is filmed via the built-in cameras of the Apple Vision Pro. Now, all this is still in its infancy. I keep repeating this. We, of course, are already able to do a lot of fun and cool things with headsets like the Meta Quest 3, and undoubtedly the Apple Vision Pro next year will have had a massive evolution, because now developers can start experimenting with this technology. The thing's out there in the wild. Apple can learn from all the input that they get. And I have no doubt that in a few years from now, this technology will be unrecognizably better compared to this first iteration. But what I think is so exciting about this is that it brings this idea of being able to immerse yourself in completely believable virtual worlds so many steps closer. That can also have some downsides, but I'm here for the upsides. I'm here for what makes me so excited about this. And there is something that is very akin to reading, actually, when it comes to these VR goggles. One of the reasons that I love reading science fiction and fantasy is that I can play these stories in the theater of my mind. It transports me to a different world, and I can feel like I am right there with Frodo and Sam, and I can hear the voices. I can picture the world, especially because I've been to New Zealand and I know what Middle Earth looks like, and I can picture that world whenever I read a chapter from those books. There is something extremely compelling about that. And as Tolkien explains in his own work on fairy tales and why they are important and not to be discarded as just children's tales, is that there is a huge value in being able to dream of a reality that is not there yet. So he compares it, for instance, to someone who is in prison and who keeps dreaming about the world beyond the walls of the prison. Maybe he's dreaming of once he's free, he will go to Honolulu or whatever, Haiti, and enjoy the nature or swim in the sea. And Tolkien criticizes the people that say that his stories, his fantasy stories, are just children's stuff and it shouldn't be taken seriously. And he says, but that's basically telling a prisoner to only talk about his fellow inmates and to talk about the prison guards and the lousy food. No, a prisoner can dream about a world that is beyond the walls of his own reality, and that gives him hope. That gives him the energy to wake up every day and to work towards his ultimate freedom. And I think it's a beautiful metaphor for what stories can do. And also, to a certain extent, what devices like the Apple Vision Pro can ultimately do. They can show us worlds beyond our imagination. They can feed our creativity and help us to always aspire to more than what we can see. And I think there is, maybe one day I should write an article about this, but I think that the the imaginative power of this new technology truly helps us to also open our minds to a reality beyond what we can touch and see. Maybe even to faith, because faith is, most of our faith has to do with stuff that we cannot see. Even if we don't believe in God, just if you believe in love, that is something you see the symptoms, you see the results of love, but you cannot see or prove love itself. It's an immaterial value that is very real nevertheless. And I think, just playing around with these technologies, it's not unlike, old-fashioned storytelling and reading books. So all the skeptics and people that say, all this technology closes you off, I've seen so many commentaries in the mainstream media that say this, this is the society going to its own perdition because we're closing up people in their own world and there's no communication anymore. And I'm thinking, you could say exactly the same things about movies, about video games, about books, and it's nonsense, of course. It's just another way of transporting you beyond the realm of what is visible. And I think there is an incredible potential there. This is also why I was always so fascinated with Star Trek and with the holodeck. It's like, man, I hope I get to live. I'm still alive when that technology becomes a reality. And I think with these AR glasses and what Apple is envisioning now, we're getting there. We're absolutely getting there. Now, there was actually an app. There is an app, and I think it's still in its experimental phase. And ultimately, this will be a full-fledged app, but you can see a demonstration on YouTube of it. It runs on the Apple Vision Pro, and it's, I think, one of the coolest demonstrations I've seen of the power of that technology yet. Now, between parentheses, I don't intend buying that first edition of the Apple Vision Pro. It is way too expensive, and it's also in a number of aspects, it is a bit too disappointing. My main criticism on this version is something that I see time and again in all these reviews, and people say the field of view is so limited. This was my very first VR experience more than 10 years ago when I first got to experience VR in a headset. I imagined that all of a sudden I would be able to look around and feel like I'm in this computer-generated world. Instead, it was as if I was looking through binoculars. There were these very thick black, contours, and I was looking through the lenses, but it was almost as if I was in a helmet looking at the world outside. The immersion was nowhere as good as I imagined it to be. And this has to do with field of view. Like when I'm watching anything right now, there is my peripheral vision, which is not very focused. It's very blurry, but it stretches out all around me. And that gives me immersion. With the Apple Vision Pro, this version, that is much more limited. So you see actually the frame around these lenses. And for me, that is a massive spoiler, I think, of what you ultimately want these glasses to do. It appears that the Quest 3 is already much more advanced in that respect. The field of view is much bigger on the Quest 3. They use maybe also different technology, I'm not sure. And I think that ultimately Apple will get there. Obviously, the second version is going to improve on a lot of the obvious things, like the border around where all these cameras are hidden. That is a very, very thick border. There have been these videos on YouTube where they take the thing apart, and you can tell that around your eyes there is this almost like an inch wide border that contains all these cameras. Obviously, that in the future that can become much more and needs to become much smaller. And the screens on the inside are super high quality, but they're still relatively small. So of course, these screens are produced by Sony. They're extremely expensive. But over time, this will become very, common. The screen technology is improving every year. So I have no doubt that, let's say 5 years from now, the field of view will be much bigger than it is right now. But, it's one of the reasons that I'm not that interested in this first version of the Apple Vision Pro, because I know that Apple will be able to use newer technology in future iterations that are actually very helpful to get more immersion. But what was that app that I was mentioning? This is a very long build-up. It is a Star Trek-based app. It's the Star Trek Archives, which I'm not familiar with, but apparently this is already an app, or maybe it's a website, I'm not sure. What it does, it gives you access to tons and tons of information about all the Star Trek series. But what makes it so cool is that it also allows you to walk around on the bridges of all these different enterprises. And what makes it so cool is that apparently in previous iterations of the app, this was just a 2D image of a CGI, generated interior, and you could still walk around, but you're looking at a flat image. But this app creates the Enterprise all around you in 3D, and I'll post a link in the show notes on Patreon beneath the link to the episode, so you can look at for yourself. And I think that the demo video doesn't even do justice to what this app can do, because it shows you like the interior of the next generation Enterprise, and then you have these floating windows. And initially I thought, oh, it's just these windows with a kind of cool, maybe it's a spherical type of rendition of the Enterprise. But then the creators actually wrote in the comments, no, you can get rid of these windows, and you can actually look around and walk around in these spaceships, and it's rendered right there in real time, and it's in 3D. And that's where I started to get super excited. It's just like, oh my goodness, how cool is that? And it's not just like the bridge of the original Enterprise and the next generation Enterprise, but it's also, for instance, Deep Space Nine. You can walk onto the promenade, and it is actually very well done. It looks amazing. This is also because, of course, the computing power of the M2 chip that is inside the Apple Vision Pro is a million times better. Well, maybe not a million times, but it's a lot better and more powerful than the chip that you find in the Meta Quest 3, which is still, decent, but you can easily tell whatever app you're playing that you're in a computer-generated world. It doesn't look very realistic. It's getting there, but it will take probably several more years for them to catch up with the power of what the Apple Silicon stuff. And so for me as a Star Trek fan, this was an app that makes me at least put the Apple Vision Pro on my wish list. Like one day in the future, I will own an Apple Vision Pro, if only for that app. I want to be on the Enterprise. And you know what would be the ultimate aspect of an app like that? Is that you press a button and a door opens, whoosh, and you step onto the holodeck. And then the holodeck generates one of these worlds that you know from the television series in 3D. How cool would that be? It's like you're really able to have that holodeck experience. We are actually much closer than we think to that experience. And I can't wait, to be honest, until we are truly there. And this is why I truly hope that Apple is right about this, that Tim Cook is right about putting all his cards on this new technology, because if they get this to work, if this becomes affordable and also wearable, because of course it's not going to stay as bulky as it is right now. Ultimately, this will be all in a pair of glasses that won't be much bigger or heavier than a regular pair of sunglasses. But once we get there, and I know that we get there, I hope that all this development that they've poured into this, the whole concept, the whole philosophy of what should these glasses do, how can they enhance our lives, that will pay off and it will become mainstream and maybe even ultimately become something as normal as carrying a phone. You know, if you would tell me 15 years ago when I was still working as a young priest in my first parish that one day I'd be watching movies on a phone, that I'd be able to record 3D video on a phone, I would have laughed at you. It was like, yeah, sure, that's Star Trek technology. That's still 2 centuries away. And it's only 15 years later. And these phones are every year, they get more powerful. Well, I think, you know, you blink, 10 years from now, the VR world will be, I think, something everybody will take for granted. And it's hard to believe it. We'll look back on those early reviews where people are like, oh, it's shutting you off from the rest of the world. This is never going to work. Apple is making the wrong move. I think it's going to be so ridiculous when you look back at those reviews. Because I think personally, I'm so excited about the potential of this technology that I think if Apple is, they have very deep pockets. They can keep developing this thing for 10 years. And even if they don't sell any headset, which of course, obviously, they're already selling a lot of this first generation version of the glasses. But even if they wouldn't sell and they wouldn't make any money, they can still continue to develop this for years to come until it becomes mainstream. And I can't wait. So my predictions, this particular version is going to be around for 2 years. And then in the 3rd year, we're going to have the announcement there is a second version coming out. And then the current model that is called Pro will lose the Pro. Maybe it will also lose the googly eyes or the appley eyes and some of the other, you know, like dispensable features. And what we have now will become like the regular one. And they will probably just cut the price in half, maybe $1,500. I think people will buy it for $1,500. And then there will be another Pro version, which is basically the technology that will then become the norm. This is what they did with the phones. And I think Apple has done this with almost everything. The Pro models will become next year's regular model. And this is how they innovate. So how much time would it take for the second iteration of this to become affordable and normal? Probably about 4 years. I can wait 4 years. But in the meantime, if Apple is listening to this and they want a priest to review their Apple Vision Pro, just send me an email. Pretty please. And with that, it is time to wrap things up, but not before I give you my final tip. If you have iOS on your phone, then check out an app called Feed with 4 E. So Feeeed. It's the most amazing feed reader because with that app, it's brand new. It just came out the other day. You can follow anything, not just RSS feeds, but you can follow podcast feeds. You can follow newsletters in your email. You have to grant it access to your Gmail account, which not everybody may be comfortable with, although they do promise that they don't share that information. You can even follow websites that don't have an RSS feed. It's amazing technology. Apparently, you can also follow Mastodon feeds and almost anything you can think of, and it will present it to you in the same way that Flipboard does these cards. And you can scroll up, and it doesn't really have an algorithm, but it will show you just like various parts. Like it even includes a step counter. And one of the cards was like, yesterday you didn't reach your goal when it comes to your daily steps. And it's like, it's so much fun. It's such a different take on a newsreader. So again, currently it's free, and I really like it. It's called Feed with 4 E's. Talk to you next week. Keep an eye on my socials to know more about my upcoming Tolkien webinar. God bless. And that's a wrap for today, ladies and gentlemen. All right, that went well. 1 hour and 2 minutes. So if I cut out the middle part, it will be exactly 1 hour. Nice. Very nice. How's everybody doing in the chat? We've got, let's see. Araja is there again. Hello again. And Kathleen is there too. Good to see you on Facebook. So I did run up those rocky stairs. I integrated that into my talk because I glimpsed your remarks like, I just finished the segment. Writing is also a form of time travel. I agree. Yeah, it's so powerful and it's fun to do. I have to say, now that I've been able to let go of like all my big goals and just keep it simple, just write a nice story, it becomes so much fun. It's like I'm not writing a book. I'm not writing a scientific article. I'm just sharing a story to my friends. That's what I love about the whole email newsletter idea. But I didn't want to call it email newsletter because, can you come up with something even more boring than that? So instead, it's like, you get access to my diary, the Diary of a Media Priest. And by calling it the Diary of a Media Priest, it can be interesting for people that see my media, my videos on TikTok and YouTube. But it can also be interesting for people that follow me because of, the work that I do in the media and maybe something that they want to learn themselves as well. We have Tomtative, who's also in the chat. Good to see you. Can you put your phone on night mode with a blue light filter? Yeah, I do have that actually. It does turn a bit yellow. And I can lower, on an iPhone, you can lower the intensity of the light to almost 0. And that helps also to not wake myself up too much. What if someone told 6-year-old you that one day you would have a magic box in your pocket that could give you the answer to every question you could think of? Yeah, that's the magic that we're currently experiencing. And I'm so happy to live in this day and age. Inu Kruger wants to know, have you heard of Has-Been Hotel? I think one of my TikTok followers mentioned this. Isn't it also like an anime or something like that? Someone wanted to know if it's okay to watch that, I think. But that's actually a question that I'm talking about in this week's episode of The Walk in general. Like people asking me, is it okay for me to watch this? Or as a priest, would you tell me not to watch this? So people want my permission, I guess. And I think it's an interesting question because it hides a more fundamental question about, is it dangerous to read beyond the circle of your beliefs? So anyway, I won't spoil what I have to say about that. You'll have to listen to The Walk. Hey, Paul, good to see you too. I hope the webinar is going to be successful, at least technically. I like that I have a deadline now because I've committed to this. I've said it publicly, so now it has to happen. But I also want to do my best to make it nice. But there's still a lot for me to learn in the days to come. Not only do I have to set it up technically and create a form where people can, sign up for the webinar. I really want to do this in the way I want to do this in the future as well. So it's not going to be like an open webinar and I'll just see who shows up. No, I really want people to register for it so it becomes a bit more of an event. And I also want to figure out how to make it look good. Of course, I could just use this and just talk like that, but I would prefer to also have a way to display images. Maybe on green screen could be an option. But anyway, to make it appealing and to make it like the best I can do with my current technical abilities. Which upcoming Star Wars movie are you most excited for? Am I going to Star Wars Celebration next year? Good questions. I'm very excited about the movie featuring Rey and the kind of the continuation of the story of Rey and hopefully Finn, and that story wasn't finished, so I'm excited about that one. The Mandalorian and Grogu, obviously, but I mean that still feels like a very obvious movie to make. So I'm not very excited because we already get that through television. So what is the movie going to add to that other than just give us more time to spend together with Grogu and Din Djarin? Am I going to the Star Wars Celebration? I'm not sure yet because it's in Japan. It's very expensive. Very far away. And not having been to 2 Star Wars Celebrations now, the location of the Star Wars Celebration actually is not that important. When I still want to go and visit Japan, but I would like to travel Japan and go visit places. I don't want to go to just a random expo center and have a Star Wars Celebration just like the 2 that I visited. I mean, it's just a convention. There's not much to it other than seeing actors and stuff. But the last time I was thinking, is this really worth it? If this hadn't been in London, I'm not sure if I would have felt that I'd gotten my money's worth, because I didn't get access to any of the panels, and you're just walking around there for 3 days in a place that could be anywhere on the planet. It's just, I don't know. I don't know if I want to pay so much money to go to Japan just for a Star Wars Celebration. Don't know if that makes sense. On the other hand, if I would go, it would be to meet my fellow Star Wars friends and to, that's for me what saved the London celebration. It was just to get to know so many friends and to make so many new contacts. That was wonderful. But for the event itself, it was not very good. Actually, I go to expos here in the Netherlands that are also, it's kind of the same genre. It's kind of Comic-Con-like. And I have to say that in Holland, we do this so much better. It's so much more fun. And I was like, wow, for a big franchise like Star Wars, I don't think they're doing a very good job. So that's what's keeping me from signing up. I don't have any plans right now, but you never know. You never know. It's just a lot of money for ultimately a very mediocre experience, and of course not counting the value of meeting fellow Star Wars friends and seeing the actors. But yeah, maybe I'll change my mind. But that's how I feel right now. John says, I've found many biblical parallels in the sequel trilogy, especially Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker. Yeah, there's biblical themes everywhere in Star Wars and religious themes. Yeah, that's why I keep watching these stories. Hey, I need to go and make myself some food. It's already 7:20. It's way past my podcasting time, but thanks so much for stopping by. I'm planning on doing a trial run for the webinar, maybe this upcoming Wednesday. So maybe I'll post some links and on Patreon or on socials as a test run for the technology. I want to try this out, but no, it's not going to be high profile. It's just going to be a test run of a webinar, a test webinar. So maybe I'll come up with an idea. Maybe it'll just be a technical test. But if you're interested, then you could help me by signing up and joining me this upcoming Wednesday. Talk to you soon. May the Force be with you. Live long and prosper.